Alpha King Edrick Wyrnhall made the scarred maid serve wine over the map of his greatest victory. And no one noticed the table had begun bleeding beneath her hand. The first silver line appeared under her smallest finger. The royal war table did not bleed for injury. It bled for altered ground. And altered ground always remembered the seal that changed it. Neris Calder felt the cold pulse inside the black stone before she saw the light. It struck once beneath her palm like a buried root demanding entry. She lifted her hand. But the silver line remained. Threading between two mountain marks, the royal map declared empty. No one at the table looked down. The nobles were still laughing at her face. "Turn the ruined side toward Commander Morth," Lord Raskin said, raising his goblet. "He has seen enough burned borders for one lifetime." Several men smiled into their wine. Neris kept the silver pitcher steady. The scar crossed her left temple, curved beneath her eye, and ended near her mouth. It was not smooth like a blade wound. Pale branches spread through it as though fire had been pressed into her skin and ordered to remain. Servants called it the enemy's kiss. Soldiers claimed it proved she came from rebel ground. No one asked why silver ash surfaced beneath the scar whenever winter came. War Commander Tavern Morth did not laugh. He watched her hand. That frightened her more. The royal war chamber crowned the highest tower of Wyrnhall Citadel. Black wolves had been carved into the ceiling, running across a stone moon. At the room's center stood the royal war table, an immense slab of nightrock inlaid with silver borders, red campaign routes, civilian roads, and ivory markers identifying every settlement recognized by the crown. 3 ivory wolves stood along the eastern frontier. 3 victories. 3 villages removed from enemy control. That was how Tavern's reports described them. Neris remembered one of those places having a bell tower. She remembered women drying blue cloth beside a river. She remembered market runners hiding winter pears in their sleeves because the keeper pretended not to see what hunger borrowed. The map showed only a gray field. "More wine," Tavern said. Neris approached. His black armor bore the white claw marks of the East March campaign, the same campaign that had given Edric 12 conquered passes, 4 silver mines, and the title Wolf of the Ash Border. Tavern placed 2 fingers beside the gray field. "Here." He wanted her hand near it. Neris poured without touching the stone. A drop of wine struck the map. The table swallowed it. Tavern's eyes narrowed. Across from him stood Alpha King Edrick Wyrnhall beneath a mantle of black winter fur. He was younger than the victories carved into the room made him appear, with dark hair tied at the nape and a face sharpened by command. His eyes were deep gray beneath the torchlight. Behind him, the crown wolf's shadow paced along the wall. It should have mirrored the king. Instead, it kept turning toward the empty eastern field. Edric noticed Neris watching. "Does my wolf trouble you?" The room quieted. Neris lowered her gaze because servants were forbidden to study the crown wolf. She shook her head. "Then what were you watching?" She could have pointed out that the shadow moved like an animal searching for a forgotten road. But maids who offered observations during war councils rarely remained maids for long. Neris touched 2 fingers to her scar, then indicated the gray field. Tavern answered for her. She recognizes burned ground. Scarred things often mistake ruin for kinship. The nobles laughed again. Edric did not. His gaze moved from her face to the place she had indicated. Was there a settlement there? An abandoned shepherd station. Tavern said. Empty before the campaign. Neris looked at him. He held her gaze. The warning was clear. Empty was a royal word. It could erase people more cleanly than fire. And war maps obeyed that word until a living root witness touched the stone. Edric turned toward her. "You disagree." Neris had survived by making silence resemble obedience. But the table pulsed again, and memory entered through her scar. A bell sounding 3 times. A woman shouting for the western road. Silver boundary ash painted across a wooden gate. Her village had used that ash. Neris placed the pitcher on the table. Tavern's hand moved toward his sword. She ignored it. With 1 finger, she touched the gray field. The royal war table opened the altered ground beneath her skin. Silver light burst from the false emptiness and ran through buried civilian routes. It did not spread like fire. It moved like blood, finding veins that had been cut from the record. Roads appeared beneath the military shading. House marks surfaced. A river divided into irrigation channels. Silver lights ignited, until one complete village glowed beneath Edric's ivory victory marker. The table did not restore every erased village. It opened only the first altered ground. The crown wolf did not defend Neris. It only strained toward the road the table had been ordered to forget. Tavern seized her wrist. Remove her. When his commander's ring touched her scarred hand, silver light climbed into its seal. The table spoke through the scrape of map needles moving beneath stone. Settlement entered. Civilian route confirmed. Village status altered before attack. Population record suppressed. The table had restored the village. It had not yet named the seal that made it disappear. No one left. Edric read the final line. Tavern released Neris as though the silver ash had burned him. He feared the ash less than what it had carried into his ring. This is border contamination, he said. The Maid carries enemy ash. She has corrupted the victory. Status record. Neris looked down. A name formed beneath her hand. Calder's Reach. Her home. The village the crown claimed had never existed. Edric saw the name, then the silver ash rising through the scar on her face. His wolf shadow pressed both forepaws against the wall, straining toward the restored civilian road without leaving the king's side. Commander, Edric said. Why does my victory table remember a populated village beneath land you marked empty? Tavern did not answer. His hand closed over the glowing commander's ring. The map had restored one village. It had not yet shown how many others had been erased. Nor had it shown which commander's seal taught the table to call civilians empty land. But Tavern's ring was already glowing as if it remembered being used. The war table had restored Calder's Reach, but not whose seal altered a living village into empty ground before Edric's army arrived. Tavern's commander ring kept glowing beneath his closed fist. Silver light pulsed through the engraved wolf claw seal as though the metal remembered a pressure his hand wanted forgotten. Around the royal war table, the nobles who had laughed at Neris Calder's scar now watched the ring instead. Neris remained beside the table with the wine pitcher abandoned near her elbow. No one apologized. No one called her a witness. 2 guards waited near the chamber doors, ready to remove the maid the moment the king allowed it. The crown wolf did not defend Neris. It only strained toward the road the table had been ordered to forget. Its shadow remained behind Edrick Wyrnhall. Forepaws braced against the wall, muzzle lowered toward the restored route beneath Calder's Reach. The wolf had not chosen her. It had recognized altered ground. War Commander Tavern Morth opened his hand. This chamber is compromised, he said. The Maid carries enemy boundary ash into a sovereign campaign record. Neris looked at the village name burning under Edric's ivory marker, Calder's Reach. For years, officials had treated that name as something she invented to make her scar more tragic. Now the table held it in silver light, complete with roads, water lines, market squares, and the western gate where boundary ash had once been painted before winter. Edric's gaze stayed on Tavern's ring. Remove your glove. Tavern did not move. Majesty. Commander seals are protected instruments. So is my war table. Tavern slowly pulled the glove free. The ring burned brighter. Silver ash had settled into its grooves. The light did not spread across the map. It remained tied to Calder's Reach and the ivory wolf marking Edric's victory. The table was not restoring every erased village. It was opening only the first altered ground. Tavern turned toward the council. Victory. Status records cannot be tried through a scarred maid carrying enemy ash. Several nobles nodded. If Neris was contamination, they did not have to ask who had rewritten the civilian classification. Neris placed her scarred palm beside the restored western road. Silver boundary memory moved beneath her skin, not royal blood, mate magic, or a hidden Luna mark. It was ash from the village gate, pressed into her scar on the night Calder's Reach burned. She looked at Tavern. Read who changed the village before the attack. The commander's expression sharpened. Edric looked at her without allowing the scar to answer for her. You can speak. I was never forbidden, Neris said quietly. Only taught that no one here wanted the route I remembered. Tavern drove his ring against the table. Enemy ash cannot reopen campaign classification. Black light spread from the seal over Calder's Reach. The houses dimmed. The western road began disappearing beneath gray military shading. Neris pressed her hand flat against the stone. Pain flashed through her scar. She did not pull away. Silver ash crossed from her palm into the restored boundary and held the civilian roots open while Tavern Seal tried to bury them again. Map needles scraped beneath the night rock. Commander Seal entered. Civilian status removed. Empty field designation applied. Victory marker approved. The table had named who changed the ground. It had not yet named where the people were filed after the map made them empty. The words appeared beneath Tavern's ring. No other village rose. No other campaign opened. Only Calder's Reach, and the 4 acts that made its people disappear before the army saw them. Neris read the second line until anger steadied her voice. You did not find empty land. You made the map empty before the soldiers arrived. Tavern kept his hand on the table. Civilian classifications change during war. Evacuation and abandonment can alter village status. Where is the evacuation route? Edric asked. None led away from Calder's Reach. The western route ended at the gate. The eastern route had been cut beneath Edric's victory marker. Edric lifted the ivory wolf and found a black seal impression pressed into its underside. Tavern's mark. If my victory marker stood on altered civilian ground, then my conquest was not rescue. It was a record rewritten before my army moved. The table accepted the statement. Royal victory attached to altered status. The seal was Tavern's, but the victory had worn Edric's name, Edric's wolf, and Edric's crown, and the people beneath that name had not yet been counted. He had accepted the title Wolf of the Ash Border, the Mines, and the Conquered Passes. He had allowed songs to call Calder's Reach a liberated field, without asking why no villagers appeared before him. Tavern turned the ring against the stone. Gray classification lines closed around the record. Commander status cannot be judged from a servant's scar memory. Neris pressed harder. Silver ash rose along the pale scar beneath her eye and entered the table through her fingertips. The boundary did not obey her as a queen. It remembered contact. It remembered the gate. It remembered which seal removed the civilian route. The gray lines fractured. The commander's ring flashed so brightly Tavern recoiled. A final victory status record burned beneath the ivory wolf. Calder's Reach had not disappeared in battle. It had been emptied on paper before anyone had the chance to run. Tavern's commander seal had removed its civilian status, applied empty field designation, and approved Edric's victory marker before the first wolf banner crossed the eastern road. But the table had not yet opened the suppressed population record. The commander seal had named who made Calder's Reach empty, but not where its people were filed after the map erased them. The restored village remained beneath Neris Calder's hand. Silver roads shining through the black stone of the royal war table. Its houses had returned to the record. Its river channels had returned. The western gate and its boundary ash had returned. The people had not. No names appeared beside the houses. No civilian count stood beneath the village mark. The population column remained a smooth strip of gray stone, untouched by silver light. Neris felt the absence through her scar. It did not feel empty. It felt compressed. War Commander Tavern Morth drew his glowing ring away from the table and covered it with his other hand. The ground classification has already been examined. There is no lawful reason to open wartime population records. The nobles around the table shifted uneasily. A village erased from a map could still be dismissed as a clerical decision. Missing people required a different explanation. Neris remained beside the war table in her servant's dress, the pale scar visible beneath the torchlight. No one had restored her status. The guards still waited near the doors. Lord Raskin still held the goblet she had been ordered to fill. She was still the scarred maid Tavern called contaminated. Only the table had stopped agreeing with him. Behind Alpha King Edrick Wyrnhall, the crown wolf's shadow lowered its head toward the blank population column. It did not shield Neris. It did not step between her and Tavern. It only listened toward the names the map had been taught not to carry. Edric removed the ivory victory marker from Calder's Reach and placed it beside the empty count. Open the population record. Tavern's jaw tightened. Population records cannot be tried through enemy boundary ash. Neris looked at the gray strip where the people of her village should have been. Read where the people went. The royal war table gave no immediate answer. Instead, small compartments opened beneath the village routes. Thin ivory counting needles rose from the stone, each marked with a wartime category. Civilian, Displaced. Enemy loss. Prisoner. Survivor. Unconfirmed. The civilian needle remained empty. The enemy loss column was packed so tightly the ivory pieces pressed against one another. Neris placed 2 scarred fingers beside it. The boundary ash beneath her skin warmed. Tavern struck his ring against the table. Enemy loss categories cannot be reopened by a surviving rebel mark. Black classification ink spread over the ivory needles. The labels began to blur. Neris pressed her palm down. Pain moved through her scar, sharp and familiar. But the silver boundary memory held the compartments open. The table did not reveal every erased settlement. No distant roads appeared. No other campaign markers shifted. It opened only the people of Calder's reach. The counting needles scraped against the stone. Population ledger entered. Civilian count removed. Enemy loss category applied. Survivor routes suppressed. The table had named where the people were filed. It had not yet named who cut the roads that could have brought the living back. Neris stared at the third line. Enemy loss category. The court had not merely erased where her people lived. It had changed what they were before counting what happened to them. You did not lose our people in war, she said. You moved them into a category where no one had to answer for them. Tavern's expression remained controlled. Enemy support populations are classified according to military risk. They were civilians when you removed them from the map. They occupied contested ground. You made the ground contested after taking away their civilian status. Edric studied the packed enemy loss needles. How many? The table opened a narrow count beneath Calder's reach. The number was larger than the official losses listed for the entire Eastern campaign. Silence spread around the chamber. Edric's face hardened. If the people of Calder's reach were filed somewhere other than civilian count, then my victory did not only stand on altered ground, it stood on altered bodies. The table accepted the statement. Royal victory benefited from reduced civilian loss. The category had been Tavern's weapon, but Edric's victory had used it to count fewer dead and claim cleaner ground. The songs written after the campaign praised him for taking the eastern passes with limited civilian cost. The crown had rewarded commanders, lowered mourning payments, and claimed the surviving routes were empty because the population ledger contained no civilians left to follow them. The seal belonged to Tavern. The clean victory belonged to Edric. Tavern turned his ring over and pressed its flat underside against the enemy loss column. Gray wax spread through the compartments. Campaign categories are sealed after royal recognition. The ivory needles began sinking back into the table. Neris felt the survivor routes disappear first, because the living were more dangerous to the victory than the dead. Not the people, the paths they had taken. She remembered smoke across the western road, figures moving toward the winter orchards, and riders turning survivors away from the river crossing. She had believed the routes vanished because fear had broken her memory. The table showed they had been suppressed deliberately. Neris dragged her scarred hand along the restored boundary. Silver light followed the road beyond the village gate, but stopped at 3 black marks where Tavern's classification wax had cut the survivor paths from the official record. Those routes were there, she said. Tavern pressed harder. Unconfirmed movement does not create lawful survivors. The crown wolf lowered its muzzle closer to the wall, still not protecting her, only following the road the table remembered and the army had cut. Edric looked from the severed routes to Tavern's ring. You removed the survivor roads after placing the village under enemy loss. The campaign required certainty. No, Neris said. It required no one returning to contradict the count, and return required roads the campaign had erased. The gray wax cracked. The population column reopened, and the suppressed routes burned silver beneath Edric's victory marker. The people of Calder's Reach had not vanished after battle. Their civilian count had been removed, enemy loss category applied, and survivor routes suppressed so Edric's victory could stand on altered ground without carrying the weight of the bodies beneath it. But the table had not yet opened the order that cut the western survivor road. The population ledger had named where Calder's Reach was filed, but not who cut the survivor roads before the living could return. The western road glowed beneath Neris Calder's hand, a narrow silver line running from the restored village toward the winter orchards. 3 black seals interrupted it before the river crossing. They were not battle marks. They were administrative closures. War Commander Tavern Morth stood across the table with his ring pressed into the first seal. Gray classification wax spread from the metal, trying to bury the road beneath the polished stone. Survivor. Route records cannot be tried through an enemy-marked scar. Neris's fingers remained against the boundary line. Her scar burned from temple to mouth, but the pain carried memory with it. Villagers moving west beneath smoke. Dark skies. Carts leaving the main road. Wounded men leaning against orchard walls. Market runners carrying water toward the river. They had survived the first burning. The road had failed them afterward. Around the table, the nobles watched without drawing closer. Neris still wore a servant's dress. The guards had not left the doors. Lord Raskin had finally set down his goblet. But his expression held more suspicion than shame. The court had accepted that Tavern's seal altered the map. It had not accepted Neris as anything more than the contamination that revealed it. Behind Edrick Wyrnhall, the crown wolf's shadow followed the western road along the wall. Its head moved whenever the silver route curved beneath the table. The crown wolf did not shield Neris. It only followed the road the table remembered and the army had cut. Edric placed 2 fingers beside the first black seal. What authority closed this route? Tavern did not look at him. Return roads were suspended throughout the East March. Rebels often disguised themselves as displaced civilians. Calder's Reach had already been classified as enemy loss, Edric said. Why would an empty field require a sealed road? Tavern's ring stopped moving. Neris felt the table waiting beneath her palm. Reed who blocked the survivor roads. The silver line struck Tavern's seal. A low scrape moved through the night rock as route needles shifted beneath its surface. The western road brightened, but no other survivor path opened. No neighboring village returned. The table held itself to Calder's Reach alone. Tavern pressed his ring harder. Unconfirmed survivors cannot accuse a recognized campaign. Black wax spread across the orchard route. Neris dragged her scarred hand toward the river crossing. The silver boundary ash beneath her skin answered each place her village had once marked for safe passage. A gate. A stone bridge. A winter shelter carved into the hill. The route did not obey her as a ruler. It remembered because her body had touched its boundary before the campaign taught the table to forget it. The black wax cracked. The table read the road. Survivor route entered. Western road sealed. Return witnesses denied. Clean victory maintained. The final line appeared beneath Edric's ivory wolf marker. No one spoke. Neris stared at the words until her voice came without trembling. You did not only bury the dead. You barred the living from proving they had survived. Tavern lifted his chin. Return witnesses would have carried enemy testimony into royal territory. They would have carried names. They would have carried accusations from a classified hostile population. They were classified hostile because you removed their civilian status. We are not reopening that question. No, Neris said. We are reading what you did after you believed it was closed. The silver road pushed past the first seal. A series of small route marks appeared beside the orchard path. Each represented a group turned away before reaching royal territory. Tavern's closure order had not merely blocked passage. It had denied those groups entry into the survivor count. Edric studied the marks. How long did the road remain sealed? The table opened a campaign duration beneath the route. 7 years. The road had remained closed long after the fighting ended. If the living were kept from returning so my victory count stayed clean, then my conquest did not end when the village burned. Edric's voice hardened. It continued every day the road stayed cut. The royal war table accepted the statement. Clean victory sustained through continued route denial. The road seal was Tavern's, but the silence it protected had strengthened Edric's crown. The East March had paid taxes to him. Its mines had armed his soldiers. Its conquered passes had secured his northern claim. Each year the survivor road remained closed. The crown kept the land without hearing from those who could challenge how it had been taken. Edric had not signed the first road order. He had ruled through every year it remained active. Tavern rotated his ring. A second layer of gray wax flowed into the western route. Majesty, campaign stability depends upon closed classifications. Reopening this road would allow every displaced claimant to challenge settled borders. Edric did not answer immediately. That hesitation cut Neris more deeply than the scar. The king could see the truth and still fear what truth would cost him. The guards remained at the doors. No royal order freed her from Tavern's reach. Neris pressed her palm against the final black seal. Pain flashed white across her vision. For a moment, the war chamber vanished, replaced by the western road beneath falling ash. She saw survivors reaching the river crossing. She saw royal riders turn their horses sideways across the bridge. She saw a sealed order held above the crowd before the road was closed. The memory entered the table. Tavern tried to withdraw his ring. Silver light caught it. The commander's seal appeared beside the closure order. Neris held the route open while the table joined the 4 lines into one record. The survivor roads had not disappeared in smoke. Tavern's order sealed the western road, denied return witnesses, and maintained Edrick's clean victory by keeping the living of Calder's reach outside the map that had already counted them as enemy loss. 7 years of silence required more than one commander's order. The western road had been sealed before the survivors reached the river, but no wartime command could remain active forever. Border closures expired after each winter, unless the crown renewed them. Neris Calder felt the renewals beneath the royal war table. They rested along the silver route like buried nails, 7 cold points driven through the road. One for every year Calder's reach remained outside the kingdom's recognized survivor count. War Commander Tavern Morth tried to cover them with his palm. The table shifted the marks beyond his reach. Alpha King Edrick Wyrnhall watched the first renewal point rise beneath the black stone. A small royal wolf had been stamped inside it, not Tavern's commander claw. The crown's mark. The nobles saw it at the same moment. Lord Raskin lowered his eyes. 2 counselors moved away from the table, as though distance might separate them from whatever the record opened next. Neris remained where she had been ordered to serve. The guards still stood at the doors. The scar across her face still made her enemy marked in the court's eyes. Revealing a closed road had not returned her village, restored her name, or made the crown trust her. It had only made silence harder to defend. Behind Edrick, the crown wolf's shadow left the remembered western road and turned toward the royal renewal marks. It did not move toward Neris. It did not shield her from the commander. Its muzzle lowered toward the first crown stamp as though it recognized a scent Edrick had forgotten to question. Tavern straightened. Annual border renewals are sovereign instruments. A servant carrying hostile boundary ash has no standing to examine them. Neris touched the first cold point. The silver ash beneath her scar answered with a pulse of winter memory. Survivors waiting beyond the river, believing the road would reopen when the campaign ended. It never did. Read why the road stayed closed after the war. Edrick's attention moved from her hand to Tavern. Open the renewal record. Majesty, Tavern said. The border was secured through recognized post-war settlement. Reopening expired claimant routes would threaten every eastern title granted under your reign. That was not my question. It is the consequence of answering it. The warning settled over the table. Land from Calder's reach had been divided among loyal houses. Silver rights had been granted. Tax routes had been built over roads the survivors still remembered as home. If the Western Passage reopened, the challenge would not end with one commander. It would reach nobles standing in that chamber. It would reach the crown. Neris pressed 2 fingers against the first renewal nail. Gray heat struck her scar. Tavern had activated his ring again. Not against the original closure, but against the annual review line. Recognized borders cannot be reopened by post-war claims. The first crown mark began sinking. Neris held it in place. Her scar did not command the table. The boundary ash carried contact memory from the village gate, the orchard road, and the river crossing. It remembered that the road had remained physically open beneath every royal declaration calling it closed. The renewal nails rose one by one. 7 winters, 7 decisions, 7 opportunities to ask why no survivors had returned. The royal war table opened its review register. Route closure renewed. Return claims denied. Border stability certified. Royal benefit retained. Edrick read the final line twice. What royal benefit? The table answered without opening another village. Eastern holdings secured. Civilian compensation avoided. Victory status preserved. Silence tightened around the nobles. Neris looked at Edrick. The First Order kept us from returning. The renewals made our absence profitable. Tavern's expression hardened. The crown cannot compensate unconfirmed survivors from hostile ground. You made them unconfirmed by cutting their road. They did not present themselves before a royal count. You barred them from the count. The classification was already lawful, because you renewed the law that protected it. Edric placed his hand beside the first royal mark. The table accepted his bloodless touch and opened the seal impression fully. His signet. Not a copy, not a forged commander's device. His own royal approval, entered during the first winter review after his coronation. A memory crossed his face. I signed the East March Stability Register. Tavrin nodded. As every sovereign must. You told me the Western Road remained dangerous because rebel bands were using survivor routes. They were. Did you show me a survivor claim from Calder's Reach? The population had already been classified as enemy loss. Neris heard the circle close. The altered population record justified the closed road. The closed road prevented survivors from challenging the population record. Each false entry protected the next. Edric stared at his signet impression. The road seal had begun with Tavrin, but the crown had renewed its usefulness every winter. I approved the closure. You approved border stability, Tavrin corrected, without asking who had been kept outside it. Tavrin did not answer. The crown wolf's shadow pressed one paw against the wall beneath Edric's seal. Not in defense of Neris. In refusal of the mark attached to its king. The gesture was small, but Edric saw it. For the first time, something like fear entered his expression, not fear of Neris, or Tavrin, or rebellion. Fear that his own wolf had understood the road before he had. Neris withdrew her hand from the first renewal point. Blood did not mark her palm. Only silver ash remained along her fingers. Edric looked at her. What do you want from this record? Not mercy. The answer struck him harder than accusation. Neris pointed toward the severed road. Open passage for the names still outside it. Tavrin stepped between her hand and the royal marks. There are no verified names. Then read the claims you denied. His commander's ring flashed. The renewal register tried to close. Neris pressed the boundary ash into the 7th winter mark before it vanished. The table opened one final line beneath Edric's signet. Survivor petitions received. The royal court had not remained ignorant because no one returned. The living of Calder's Reach had reached the crown 7 times, and Edric's annual seal had renewed the road that kept their names unheard. The 7th petition opened before anyone could close the register. A strip of silver paper rose from beneath Edric's royal seal and unfolded across the royal war table. Its edges were darkened by weather. Its surface creased where someone had carried it through rain, ash, and winter roads. No noble moved closer. The petition had survived longer than the village named inside it. Neris Calder recognized the boundary script before the first line became visible. Calder's Reach had used narrow letters, written close together to save ink during hard winters. Every household marked safe roads with the same angled hand. The names began appearing one by one. Mill workers, orchard keepers, market runners, healers, route guards. People Tavrin's campaign ledger had already counted as enemy loss. Behind Alpha King Edrick Wyrnhall, the crown wolf's shadow lowered its head toward the signatures. It did not come to Neris. It followed the names. War Commander Tavrin Morth reached for the paper. Edric caught his wrist before his fingers touched it. Not violently. Not protectively. Simply with enough force to stop the record from being closed. What was done with these petitions? Edric asked. Tavrin withdrew his hand. Post-war claims were reviewed through the East March Settlement Office. By whom? Authorized border clerks. Under whose command? Tavrin's jaw hardened. Mine. Neris kept her scarred hand beside the 7th winter mark. The silver ash beneath her skin had turned cold again. Carrying the memory of roads walked by people who still believed written names could reach a king. Edric looked at the petition. Read the review path. The table remained still. Tavrin spoke before Neris could. Survivor petitions are not military records. The war table has no lawful authority to judge civilian claims. Neris looked at him. You used military classification to deny they were civilians. That does not make this chamber a claims court. No, she said. It makes the claims part of the victory you protected. The silver paper trembled. A black line appeared beneath the signatures, not written by the survivors, but stamped after the petition reached royal territory. Claimants unverified. Enemy testimony suspected. Royal review unnecessary. Petition returned to border authority. Edric's expression changed at the 3rd line. Royal review unnecessary. Tavrin lifted his chin. The claims failed verification because the civilian count had been removed. The settlement office followed the existing population ledger. The population ledger followed your altered classification. Each office followed lawful record. Neris heard the same circle again. Every lie had been made legal by the lie before it. She touched the first signature. The boundary ash in her scar warmed, and the table opened a route beside the petition. It showed the paper entering through the western gate, passing the river clerk, then reaching the East March settlement office. The route stopped there. No line continued to the royal archive. No clerk carried it to Edric. The crown wolf's shadow followed the dead route until its muzzle reached the blank space beneath the throne. Edric looked toward that missing line. You certified that no verified survivors had petitioned the crown. Tavern did not deny it. No verified survivors had. You had already denied them verification. Their testimony came from hostile ground. Neris's fingers tightened against the table. You made the ground hostile. Then you used the ground to silence the people who came from it. Tavern's gaze shifted to her scar. And yet the court is expected to trust a witness marked by enemy ash. Neris did not cover her face. For years, the scar had been used as proof that she belonged to a place the crown considered dangerous. Now the same mark was the only surviving contact record tying her body to the western boundary. Read how the claimants were handled, she said. Tavern's commander ring flashed. Black ink spread over the petition. Unverified testimony cannot reopen a recognized settlement. Neris pressed her palm to the paper. The scar burned sharply, but the silver boundary memory held the signatures in place. The table opened only the petitions from Calder's reach. No other village appeared. No other border claim entered the chamber. 4 lines formed beneath the 7th winter seal. Survivor petition received. Claimant status denied. Royal review bypassed. Silence certification renewed. Edric read the last line. My seal renewed the certification. Yes, Tavern said. Because the settlement office reported no lawful claimants. The office you commanded. The office responsible for protecting the border from false restitution. The road seal had been Tavern's. The annual renewal had been Edric's. The petition denial connected them. Tavern had built the closed system. Edric had trusted it because it preserved a victory that strengthened his crown. The silver paper unfolded farther. A final name appeared near the bottom. Neris Calder. Route witness. Western gate. The scar along her face pulsed with the same silver light. Edric stared at the signature, then at the maid standing beside his table. You petitioned the crown 7 years ago. What answer did you receive? Neris looked toward Tavern. No answer. The table corrected her. Claimant detained. Enemy debt assigned. Palace service transfer approved. The chamber seemed to contract around the words. Neris had not entered Wyrnhall Citadel because fortune carried a scarred village survivor into royal service. She had reached the crown as a witness. Tavern's office had turned her petition into a sentence. Edric released the commander's wrist. He did not order Neris freed. Not yet. His gaze remained on the royal approval beneath her transfer. The petition had carried her name toward him once before. His crown had converted it into ownership before he ever learned she had spoken. The transfer order had not brought Neris Calder into the palace as a servant. It had brought her in as evidence no one intended to hear. The silver petition remained open across the royal war table, her name fixed near the bottom beside the words Route Witness, Western Gate. Beneath it, the black transfer lines connected the East March settlement office to Wyrnhall Citadel. Not to the kitchens. Not to the general servant registry. Directly to the royal war household. Neris had spent 7 years carrying wine across the same campaign records her petition had tried to challenge. Tavern Morth looked at the transfer route as though it were merely another lawful road. Enemy debt service is permitted under border settlement law. Edrick Wyrnhall did not look at him. Read the debt. The commander's ring flashed once. The silver paper began folding inward, trying to hide the transfer lines beneath the petition. Neris placed her scarred hand beside her own name. Pain moved through the left side of her face, but she held the record open. The crown wolf's shadow remained behind Edric. It did not move toward her. It lowered its head toward the chain of offices that had changed a witness into a debtor before placing her beneath the king's roof. Small black marks rose from the war table, each shaped like a counting weight. Property lost during pacification. Border protection assessed. Enemy restitution assigned. Service debt imposed. Neris stared at the first line. Her village had been removed from civilian count. Its people had been classified as enemy loss. Its survivor road had been sealed. Then the crown had charged the survivors for the cost of destroying it. Tavern spoke before Edric could. Pacification debts are assessed against hostile settlements that require royal force. You classified the settlement as empty, Edric said. Before the campaign. Then who incurred the debt? Tavern's silence lasted only a moment. Any surviving claimant connected to the hostile ground. Neris looked at him. You denied we were survivors when we asked to return. You were unverified, but verified enough to owe the crown. A few nobles lowered their eyes. The contradiction had become too plain to disguise as administrative complexity. Neris touched the service line. The table opened the transfer record. Claimant debt entered. Witness status revoked. Palace service assigned. Petition access barred. The table had named how Neris entered the palace. It had not yet named why the royal war household was chosen. Edric read the third line again. Why was she assigned here? Tavern's expression remained controlled. Royal households absorb high-risk border debtors because ordinary estates lack proper security. She was placed in my war chamber. She was placed where she could be observed. Neris felt the truth before the table showed it. Observed. Not protected. Not employed. Kept near the records she could reopen, under a title that made every accusation sound like servant resentment. The nobles had not mocked her scar by accident. The court had been taught what the scar meant before she ever entered the room. Enemy marked. Contaminated. Unreliable. Tavern had not needed to silence her voice. He had made her testimony socially worthless. Edric looked at Neris. Did you know your petition was still held beneath the table? No. Did you know why you were assigned to the war household? I was told the palace had purchased my debt. The word purchased changed the air between them. Edric's jaw tightened. He had seen her at the edge of councils for years. She had poured wine while officers discussed the East March. She had cleaned blood, wax, and ash from the victory table. He had noticed her scar and accepted the explanation that she came from rebel ground. He had never asked whose debt placed her there. The royal household paid this transfer, he said. The table answered. Debt value received. Witness custody transferred. Royal service credited. The payment had come from Edric's household accounts during his first year as king. He had not written Neris's name. He had not read her petition. But his palace had paid Tavern's office to take possession of the witness who might have exposed the campaign. Tavern lifted his chin. The crown purchased thousands of lawful service debts after the war. That does not lessen this one, Edric said. It proves the system was ordinary. No, Neris said. It proves what happened to me could be repeated without anyone needing to call it unusual. The table trembled beneath her palm. A narrow custody mark appeared beside her transfer. Tavern immediately struck it with his ring. Servant placements cannot be retried through a disputed petition. Black wax spread over the custody line. Neris held the record with the boundary ash in her scar. The silver memory did not make her stronger than the king or the commander. It only prevented the root from being rewritten while she still touched it. Edric watched her hand begin to shake. You are hurting. So is the record. His expression shifted. But he did not reach for her. A king taking her hand before the custody law opened would allow Tavern to call the record coerced by royal preference. Edric understood that. So did Neris. He kept his hands at his sides and ordered, read the custody purpose. The table resisted. Tavern pressed harder. Gray wax covered half the line. The crown wolf's shadow turned from the transfer route toward the commander's ring. It did not defend Neris. It watched the instrument trying to bury what its king had failed to read. Silver ash moved from Neris's scar into the final custody mark. The wax split. One line opened beneath her palace assignment. Living route witness contained within royal war household. Neris had not been brought to Wyrnhall because the palace needed another maid. She had been placed beside Edric's victories, so Tavern could keep the only surviving boundary witness close, discredited, and under the crown's own lock. The custody line changed the room before anyone spoke. Living route witness contained within royal war household. The nobles who had treated Neris Calder as a scarred servant now understood why she had been kept beside the royal war table for 7 years. Not because she was harmless, because her presence was dangerous to every victory resting on altered ground. War Commander Tavern Morth removed his ring from the table. The black wax around the custody record stopped spreading, but the silver line remained open beneath Neris's trembling hand. She was contained under lawful border authority, Tavern said. That does not grant her standing before the crown. Neris looked at the custody mark. If I had no standing, you would not have needed to contain me. Tavern's face remained still. Behind Alpha King Edrick Wyrnhall, the crown wolf's shadow turned away from the transfer route and lowered its muzzle toward a narrow seam beneath the table's eastern edge. It did not approach Neris. It did not place itself between her and the commander. One claw scraped against the wall, following something hidden beneath the stone. Edric heard it. What is beneath that section? Tavern answered too quickly. Expired border registrations. Neris felt the silver ash inside her scar pull toward the same seam. The sensation was different from the altered village, the population count, or the cut survivor road. Those records had felt wounded. This one felt buried. She moved her hand toward the eastern edge. 2 guards shifted at the doors. Tavern raised his ring. The servant has already contaminated enough sovereign records. Edric did not order the guards away. He also did not permit them to seize her. Let the table decide whether it recognizes her contact. Tavern's eyes hardened. Majesty, the table has shown only that enemy ash can reopen suppressed routes. No, Neris said. It has shown that altered ground remembers a living witness. She placed her scarred fingertips against the seam. The royal war table remained dark. For one breath, nothing answered. Then a thin silver frame appeared beneath her hand. Not a village. A registry. The stone opened into 4 narrow panels marked with the old symbols of border roads. Bridge, gate, river, and winter path. The symbols had been scratched nearly smooth, as if someone had tried to remove them without breaking the table. Tavern struck his ring against the frame. Neutral witness law was dissolved before the East March campaign. The silver panels tried to close. Neris held her hand in place. The scar along her face burned, but the ash beneath it did not flare like royal magic. It followed contact points: gate ash, river stone, orchard road, and the winter path where survivors had once hidden. Edric watched the sequence. The scar is reading routes. It remembers them, Neris said. That is not the same as ruling them. The distinction mattered. The map did not kneel to her. The crown wolf did not choose her. Her blood carried no hidden royal claim. Her body had simply survived contact with a boundary system designed to preserve civilian roots when kings and commanders changed. The buried registry opened. Boundary witness entered. Neutral route status removed. Blood map reader designation concealed. Enemy marked servant classification applied. The words appeared beside Neris's name. A murmur moved through the nobles. Tavern faced them before fear could become doubt. Blood map readers were abolished because they served rebel settlements and challenged military authority. Neris looked at him. We challenged altered routes. You permitted villages to resist royal relocation. We recorded where people lived before armies renamed the ground. You placed civilian testimony above command. We placed it beside command so kings could see what their orders would cross. Edric read the 3rd line again. Blood map reader designation concealed. For the first time since the table opened, he said her name without calling her maid or servant. Neris Calder. She looked at him. What did a blood map reader do? She could hear the court waiting for an answer that sounded like forbidden magic. We walked recognized boundaries, she said. We touched gate ash, bridge stone, and marked roads. If military records changed afterward, the table could compare the new classification against what the ground had held before. You were not meant to command the map. No, you were meant to contradict it. When someone changed it, Tavern stepped closer. And that power made them politically dangerous. No, Edric said. The record that required their removal made them dangerous to someone. Tavern's ring flashed. The black seal struck Neris's registry panel. Enemy-marked witnesses cannot accuse recognized commanders. Silver pain crossed Neris's vision. Her fingers slipped. The panel began closing around her name. Edric moved 1 step forward, then stopped. If he placed his hand over hers, Tavern would claim the table had answered royal pressure rather than witness contact. Neris saw the restraint. It was not rescue. But it was the first time he allowed her to hold the truth without taking control of it. "Keep it open," he said. Not gently, not as a plea, as recognition that the record required her, not him. Neris pressed the scarred side of her hand against the frame. Silver boundary ash entered the scratches where her designation had been removed. The panel reopened. A second name appeared beneath hers. Then a third. Both were marked deceased during border pacification. Neris knew them. Her mother, Neris Calder. Her uncle, Oren Vale. They had been the other registered blood map readers assigned to the eastern routes before the campaign. The table had not chosen Neris after they died. It had recognized the last registered witness still alive. Tavern's control finally cracked. "Close the registry." No one obeyed. The crown wolf shadow continued scratching toward a final sealed line beneath the three names. Edric looked at Tavern. "What order is under that panel?" Tavern said nothing. Neris followed the scar's pull into the deepest mark. The silver frame opened one fraction farther. Blood map readers removed before campaign certification. The table had restored Neris's true witness status. It had not yet revealed who ordered every neutral route witness removed before Edric's victories were allowed to become law. The buried registry triggered a second lock beneath the war table. A narrow iron plate slid from the eastern edge and settled beside Tavern Morth's commander ring. Unlike the silver witness panels, this plate bore no village routes, names, or population counts. It held campaign certification, the law that decided when conquest became history. Neris Calder kept her scarred hand against the witness frame. The silver boundary ash beneath her skin had dimmed, but the table still recognized her contact. Her mother's name remained beside hers. So did her uncle's. Both had been removed before Edric's eastern victories were certified. War Commander Tavern stepped toward the iron plate. Edric moved first. He placed the ivory victory marker between Tavern's ring and the certification lock. It was not an order of protection for Neris. It was a demand that the campaign answer through the symbol carrying his name. "Open the certification path," he said. Tavern's voice remained controlled. "Neutral witness removal predates your reign. So did the false ground beneath my victory. The East March required one military record. Blood map readers produced competing versions of every border. They produced the civilian version. They produced instability." Neris looked at the concealed witness panel. Only for commanders who needed the ground to say something else. The crown wolf's shadow left the names and followed the iron plate across the wall. It did not stand beside Neris. It lowered its head toward Edric's ivory marker, as though waiting to learn what command had been attached to the king's victory before the crown ever wore it. Tavern pressed his ring against the certification lock. Campaign authorization cannot be challenged by abolished witnesses. Black wax filled the plate's edges. Neris dragged one silver-marked finger from the witness registry to the ivory wolf marker. The table linked them. The certification plate opened. Neutral witness review required. Blood map reader objections pending. Commander review substituted. Campaign certification approved. Edric read the third line. "You replace neutral review with your own." Tavern did not deny the procedure. The border could not remain paralyzed while enemy marked readers disputed military necessity. They were removed before they could dispute it. They were removed because their office had become a weapon against the crown. Neris felt the scar tighten across her face. "My mother recorded roads. Your mother obstructed relocation. She recorded that the villages were occupied. She refused to recognize military classification, because your classification was false." Tavern turned toward Edric. "Majesty, this is precisely why the readers were abolished. They treated contact memory as superior to sovereign command." Edric's eyes remained on the certification record. "No, they treated command as something the ground could verify." The table accepted the distinction. Witness review bypassed before royal victory recognition. A fifth line appeared beneath the original four. Removal authority requested under emergency air seal. The chamber went still. Edric had not yet been king when Calder's reach burned. But he had commanded the Eastern Army as heir, and held emergency authority over military routes. Tavern looked at the line as though it proved necessity rather than guilt. "You granted the War Office temporary discretion. I granted authority to secure supply roads. And neutral witnesses were obstructing those roads. Did I authorize their removal? You authorized campaign continuity. That is not the same answer." It was the answer the border required. Neris watched Edric's face as the table opened the emergency seal impression. His mark rested beneath Tavern's request. The crown had not forged it. The commander had not copied it. Edric had signed the authority that allowed the War Office to remove anyone classified as an obstruction to campaign continuity. He had not written Blood Map Reader. He had not written Neris's mother. But the law had carried his seal to both. The request was Tavern's, Neris said. The authority was yours. Edric did not look away. Yes. The single word unsettled the court more than denial would have. Tavern's expression hardened. You were winning a war. I was trusting the man who decided which witnesses the war was permitted to hear. You trusted your commander, and built my victories from what he allowed me to see. The crown wolf's shadow pressed its muzzle against the wall beneath the emergency seal. For years, Edric had believed his wolf resisted Eastern victory rites because the animal remembered battle. Now he understood it remembered the missing witnesses. Tavern twisted his ring against the plate. The certification lines began closing. Even if the review was flawed, the victories are recognized law. Undoing them would reopen every eastern border, weaken the crown, and reward hostile claimants. Neris held the witness frame open, though her arm trembled. You are still calling the survivors hostile. Because recognition cannot survive if every scar becomes a court. My scar is not the court. She looked at Edric. The record is. The black wax reached the emergency seal. Edric lifted the ivory wolf marker and pressed it into the center of the certification plate. The table answered his recognized victory symbol. Royal acceptance entered. Commander substitution concealed. Witness removal undisclosed. Victory law incomplete. Tavern's face finally lost its calm. An incomplete victory could be challenged without erasing the border immediately. It required a new hearing before the crown could renew ownership, military honors, or settlement rights. Edric looked at the nobles whose estates had grown from the East March. At dawn, no Eastern title will be renewed until the survivor roads and witness records are heard. You would place the throne beneath a servant's scar? Tavern asked. No, Edric said. I am placing my victories beneath the records they were built to avoid. Neris's fingers slipped from the silver frame. Edric caught the edge of the table instead of catching her hand. Leaving the witness contact hers alone, their eyes met across the open certification plate. He had not chosen her over the kingdom. He had chosen to make the kingdom answer her. The final concealed order opened beneath his emergency seal. Blood map readers removed before certification. Return witnesses contained. Commander record accepted as sole truth. Royal victory granted without civilian challenge. Edric's conquests had not become lawful because the border was empty. They had become lawful because Tavern removed every living witness who could prove it was not. At dawn, Edrick Wyrnhall carried his ivory victory marker into the public court and broke it before the Eastern lords. The sound was small. The consequence was not. Every title granted through the East March campaign dimmed along the royal war table. Mine claims, border estates, military honors, and tax rights remained visible, but none could renew while the victory beneath them stood incomplete. Neris Calder stood beside the table in the same servant's dress she had worn the night before. No jewels covered her scar. No royal cloak marked her as forgiven. She had asked for no ceremonial place. She had asked that the western road be opened before anyone spoke of honor. War Commander Tavern Morth entered under escort, his commander ring sealed inside a black evidence case. He had not confessed. You cannot suspend recognized conquest through an abolished witness office, he said. The eastern houses will fracture. Rival pacts will cross every disputed boundary. Edric faced the court without taking the throne. The boundaries will remain guarded. The titles will remain suspended. No claimant will be dispossessed without hearing. And no victory will renew without civilian review. You would weaken your crown. My crown was strengthened by keeping survivors outside its records. Tavern turned toward Neris. And now a scarred debtor directs royal policy. Neris placed her hand beside the restored western road. The table did not open every erased village in the East March. It held only Calder's reach, its population record, and the route its survivors had been denied. I am not directing the crown, she said. I am requiring it to read. Tavern's gaze sharpened. Enemy. Marked witnesses cannot restore lawful passage. Neris looked toward the evidence case. Then let your sealed ring answer without touching me. Edric ordered the case placed on the table. The moment Tavern's ring crossed the western route, 4 administrative lines opened beneath it. Witness custody active. Survivor road closure renewed. Victory certification dependent. Sovereign renewal required. The court went silent. Tavern had built the system, but he could not preserve it alone. The closed road survived because each royal renewal allowed the false victory to remain useful. Edric removed the burned silver signet from his hand. If I refuse renewal? The table answered. Witness custody void. Western road reopened. Civilian hearing restored. Victory status suspended. Tavern stepped forward despite the guards. Majesty. Refusal will return hostile claimants to Crown land. Neris's voice cut across his. They are not returning to your record. They are returning to the road you kept from them. Edric placed his signet beside the root, but did not press it down. He looked at Neris. Is this what you choose? Not what mercy he could offer. What she chose. The court waited for vengeance. Neris wanted none. Open the road, she said. Count the living before dividing the land. Hear each claim without commander classification. And do not call restitution mercy. The crown is returning access. It had no right to close. Edric pressed his signet into the refusal line. The black seals across the western route split. The royal war table did not bleed. It corrected. Silver light passed from Calder's reach through the winter orchards, over the river bridge, and into royal territory. For the first time in 7 years, the route ended at the public court instead of Tavern's settlement office. The crown wolf's shadow followed the reopened road along the wall. It did not kneel to Neris. It did not choose or protect her. When the route reached the court, the wolf lowered its head toward the names entering the restored hearing column. Acknowledgement, not allegiance. Edric ordered Tavern confined for unlawful classification, witness containment, and concealment of civilian review. Tavern offered no confession. He only said the kingdom would regret teaching every boarder to challenge a king. Neris answered, a boarder should challenge any king who needs civilians removed before victory can look clean. By winter, the western road carried people home. Some had built lives beyond the river. Others came only to restore their names. The crown did not return every estate at once. Independent route hearings began with one village, one claim, and one road at a time. Neris was released from debt service because the debt had been created from an unlawful enemy classification. She refused a noble title. Instead, she became the first independent keeper of civilian routes, answerable neither to the War Office nor to the Eastern Houses. Months later, she found Edric beside the reopened western gate. He wore no crown. The crown wolf moved as an ordinary shadow at his feet. I cannot ask you to forget what my name carried, he said. No, I cannot ask forgiveness because I finally read what was placed before me. No. He accepted both answers. Then may I walk the road with you? Neris studied the king who had once allowed others to define her scar, and the man learning that listening did not make him smaller. She offered him no vow, only her unscarred hand. Walk beside me, she said, not ahead. Edric took her hand without command. And together they crossed the western gate, while Calder's reach returned to the kingdom one living name at a time.